Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping ourselves into the chariot and heading back thousands of years, not really to explore military campaigns or, Talus intrigues, but to uncover the financial blueprint of the ancient world's most prosperous metropolis.
Babylon.
Babylon, yeah. But by all accounts, it was an economic miracle. It's often called the cradle, where the basic principles of finance, ones we recognize and use all over the world today, were first really nurtured.
Right.
So our mission for you, the learner in this deep dive, is to extract that timeless financial wisdom. And it's surprising, really, how it addresses almost every single modern financial dilemma.
That's the amazing part.
And figure out exactly how we can translate these, play tablets into personal prosperity today.
Okay, let's set the scene, because every great financial lesson seems to start with a moment of broke desperation, doesn't it?
It often does, yeah.
Our story kicks off with two characters, Bansier, who's a skilled chariot maker, and Kobe, an accomplished musician. They're living in this incredible city, Babylon, famed for its riches, its huge walls. Yeah.
Yet, after a whole lifetime of hard, honest work, their purses are empty. Just nothing.
It's the classic irony, isn't it? You're surrounded by wealth, you see the gold statues, the massive estates, powerful armies, but you personally possess none of it.
Yeah.
And Bansier has this real light bulb moment. He realizes they've just been content to work long hours and then, spend their earnings freely.
Just letting it flow out.
Exactly. Which leaves them with nothing but the ability to dream about wealth.
That realization is so powerful. Bansier points out they work meticulously at their crafts. He builds these amazing chariots that never break. Kobe plays his lyre so beautifully. Even the gods supposedly listen.
Right, masters of their trade.
But they never actually directed that same effort toward acquiring silver and gold itself. They achieved mastery in their work, but total financial oblivion in their lives.
And that's the critical distinction he makes. Bansier asks Kobe, are we more than dumb sheep? Meaning, are we just creatures who feed and clothe ourselves only to be sheared year after year by circumstance, by others?
Oof, harsh.
Yeah. So their goal becomes crystal clear. They must acquire wealth. And they need to learn the secret from the guy who perfected getting rich, Archad, the richest man in all Babylon.
So when they finally go approach Archad, who's actually an old friend of theirs, his view on wealth is immediately, instructive. And honestly, it's quite refreshing compared to maybe how we sometimes think of it.
Absolutely. He doesn't define wealth as just a pile of gold you hoard, like a dragon.
Right, not Scrooge McDuck diving into coins.
No, exactly. Archad defines wealth as a power that unlocks possibilities. The ability to, say, properly ornament your home, or the freedom to sail distant seas and see the world, the chance to feast on delicacies, or even, the spiritual satisfaction of funding the building of magnificent temples for the gods. He decided early on he just wasn't going to be content with the lot of a poor man.
And he hits them with that first uncomfortable truth, doesn't he? When he talks to Bansier and Kobe, he points out, each of you, have let slip by sufficient time to have made yourselves wealthy.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow.
It wasn't because they didn't have opportunity or didn't have time. It was a lack of dedicated focus and, importantly, study.
That is the absolute core idea here. Success in finance, just like making chariots or playing music, it's a learned skill. Archad insists that proper preparation is essential.
You can't just wing it.
No. He says our actions can be no wiser than our thoughts, and our thinking can be no wiser than our understanding. He's basically telling them, you need to treat getting wealthy like a profession. It requires dedicated education.
Okay, so let's unpack this required knowledge then, starting with that fundamental principle, the one that really turned Archad's own life around. He tells this story about his early years.
Yeah, working as a scribe.
Right, in the Hall of Records. Long hours, meticulously carving documents onto clay tablets, earning a decent wage for the time. But, like Bansier and Kobe, he had nothing to show for it.
And isn't that just the universal experience? So many people feel this today. Archad's earnings, everything he made just got absorbed. Cost of living, food, clothes, maybe offerings to the gods.
Basic survival stuff.
And other things he couldn't even recall. The money came in, and poof, it flowed right back out again.
His whole situation only shifted when Algamish, this incredibly wealthy moneylender, shows up needing a really complex carving done, overnight.
Right, a big rush job.
And Archad, who seems to be a man of action even then, he barters. He offers his intense labor, not for a higher fee, but for Algamish's wisdom on getting rich.
That was the smart move.
Yeah.
And Algamish delivers. He reveals the lesson that honestly forms the bedrock of pretty much all subsequent financial thinking. He says, I found the road to wealth when I decided that a part of all I earned was mine to keep, and so will you.
A part of all I earned was mine to keep. It sounds so simple, deceptively simple.
It really is.
Because I think for most people listening today, the immediate reaction is, okay, great, but I can't afford to save. I barely cover rent, food, the bills. What makes this principle so hard to actually put into practice?
Well, Algamish immediately nails the psychological flaw in how Archad, and most of us, think about money. He asks him point blank, do you not pay the garment maker? Do you not pay the sandal maker? Do you not pay for the things you eat?
Right, you pay everyone else.
Exactly. Archad was dutifully paying every single person he owed, meeting every obligation. But he was failing to pay the one person whose labor actually made all that money possible in the first place, himself.
Algamish calls him a fool, a dullard. Says he's working purely for others. He basically compares Archad's situation to being a slave.
Yeah, a slave who gets just enough to survive subsistence while all the real value they create goes straight to their master. It's a really harsh reframing, but it forces a complete shift in perspective.
It absolutely does. It takes saving from being this leftover burden, something you do if there's anything left at the end of the month.
Which there rarely is.
Right. And it moves it to being a non-negotiable fixed expense right at the very top of your priority list.
The prescription he gives is incredibly strict, too. Keep not less than 1/10 of everything you earn. Doesn't matter how little you earn, save 1/10. Pay yourself first.
And here's the kicker. You have to arrange all your other spending, the clothes, the food, charity, everything around the remaining 9/10. You adapt your life to fit the savings goal, not the other way around.
And the power in this, the thing that makes it stick, is the analogy Algamish uses. That first copper piece you save, it's the seed from which your tree of wealth will grow.
The seed analogy.
Yeah. If you eat the seed, spend that first bit you saved, you get immediate but very fleeting gratification. But if you plant it, you nourish it, you water it with consistent savings, eventually you'll have this massive tree providing shade.
Security, contentment.
Exactly. For a lifetime. It totally transforms saving. It's not deprivation anymore. It becomes this purposeful act of cultivation. You're building something for the long term.
That sense of purpose, that cultivation mindset, leads us right into the practical advice Archad shared later. When he became the richest man and the king basically tasked him with teaching a class of 100 men how to do it too.
Right. The famous 7 cures for a lean purse.
And we start right where Algamish left off, with implementing that first core principle.
Yes. Cure number 1. Starting the purse to fattening. This is just the practical application of the 100th rule. For every 10 coins that come into your purse, doesn't matter if it's from your job, from selling something, from rent coned, you only take out 9 for your expenses.
Only 9.
That 10th coin, it's yours to keep. It stays in the purse. It must never be spent on consumption.
And the really interesting thing Archad observed, he says, was that doing this didn't actually make his life significantly harder. He felt he managed just as well on the 9/10 as he had on the whole 10/10.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is. And he even claimed that coins surprisingly came to him more easily once he started practicing this. He sort of hints it's like a law of the gods.
We can probably interpret that law of the gods today as maybe the law of attraction that comes from disciplined behavior.
Right.
Or just, the focus it creates.
Right.
Once you prioritize saving, you stop seeing yourself as just perpetually serving everyone else's needs. You start actively looking for opportunities to grow your own treasure. That discipline brings clarity.
And it forces that choice you mentioned earlier. What do you desire more? Quick, disposable gratification, a fancier meal, nicer clothes right now.
Or substantial belongings, gold, lands, income-producing assets down the road. The coins you spend get you the first thing. The coins you keep get you the second.
Okay, which leads us straight to the big hurdle for everyone. How on earth do you manage to live on just 9/10, especially if things are already tight? That brings us to cure number 2. Controlling expenditures.
The budget.
Yeah, the dreaded B word. For most listeners, I think budgeting feels like restrictions, self-denial, maybe even misery.
And that's exactly why Archad defines the purpose of the budget so differently. The goal isn't restriction just for restriction's sake. The goal is precision.
Precision, okay.
The purpose is to make sure your necessary expenses and your worthwhile desires get satisfied, but without spending a single copper more than that 9/10 of your earnings you've allocated.
So it's about conscious choices.
Absolutely. You have to distinguish between what's truly necessary and what's just a fleeting desire.
His suggested method is, archaic engraving on clay, but The principle is beautifully practical.
Yeah, just list everything you want to spend money on. Then you have to be ruthless. Select only those things that are absolutely necessary and those desires that are actually possible within your 9/10 budget.
And the hard part.
The hard part is you have to deliberately cross out the rest, look at them, acknowledge them as desires, but accept they must go unsatisfied, at least for now.
Wow, that's a very proactive definition of a budget. It's not just tracking where the money went wrong last month.
Exactly. He calls the budget the first assistant in defending thy fattening purse. By planning your spending ahead of time, you're making a conscious decision to fulfill your most important desire first, which is the desire to become wealthy and secure.
Because if your spending is just erratic, unplanned,
Then you end up fulfilling the desires of the shopkeepers and merchants, not your own long-term goals.
Okay, so let's say you've done it. The discipline is there, you're saving the 10th, you're controlling spending with the budget, the purse is starting to feel heavier.
A good feeling.
A very good feeling. But what's the mistake in just, letting that money sit there, maybe burying it under the floor tiles, Babylonian style? That brings us to cure 3, making the gold multiply.
Right. Archad warns that gold is sitting in a purse. Yeah, it's gratifying to touch, to jingle maybe,
Sure.
but it earns nothing. It has to be put to labor. The insight here is that the gold you've saved must be treated as capital, and capital has to be put to work to generate more capital.
He shares his own first successful investment experience, loaning money to Agar, the shield maker.
Yeah, Agar needed capital to buy bronze because his shield business was booming. Archad lent him the money.
And when Agar repaid the loan, he also paid a liberal rental, what we'd call interest today.
But here's the crucial part, the thing that really defines long-term wealth building. Archad didn't just spend that interest payment. He immediately loaned the rental back out again. He put the earnings to work, too.
Ah, the beginnings of compounding.
Exactly. This is where he introduces that brilliant metaphor, begetting an army of golden slaves. Each piece of gold you save is like a slave laboring tirelessly for you.
Okay.
And the earnings it makes, the rent, the interest, those are its children. And those children grow up and start earning for you too. It's such a powerful way to picture compound interest.
It really is. And the power of that compounding is just astonishing over time. He illustrates this with the story of the farmer.
Oh yeah, the farmer who invested just 10 pieces of silver for his son.
Only 10 pieces.
It drives the point home perfectly. The farmer invests those 10 pieces. The rental, the interest earned each year, is added back to the principal. It's reinvested.
So year after year.
Year after year. After 20 years, that original 10 pieces had grown to 30.5 pieces, which is good, tripled your money.
Decent return.
But the real magic happens later. By the time the son was 50 years old, those original 10 pieces, just left alone to multiply, had grown to 167 pieces of silver.
Wow, from 10 to 167. That's almost 17 times the initial investment.
And the original saver didn't have to lift a finger after that initial act of putting the money to work wisely.
That's the dream, isn't it?
It is. The ultimate goal, Archad says, is to create a golden stream of wealth, something that flows constantly into your purse, whether you're working, sleeping, or sailing off to distant seas. You're no longer solely dependent on the sweat of your own brow.
But as Archad himself found out the hard way, that enthusiasm for making gold multiply can easily lead to, well, recklessness.
Oh, yes, big time.
Which means we have to immediately shift gears to cure number 4, guarding treasures from loss. This feels like maybe the most critical lesson for modern times, especially with everyone chasing quick, high returns.
I think you're right. This one is huge. And the core principle is so simple, but so often ignored. The first sound principle of investment is security for thy principal. Protect your initial capital.
Don't lose the seed money.
Exactly. Don't get misled by romantic ideas or, foolish speculation trying to get rich quick. The penalty of taking on too much risk, Archad states very clearly, is probable loss.
And his own failure here is such a powerful warning. He talks about when he'd first saved up a respectable amount of gold.
His first little pot of capital.
Yeah. He entrusted it all to Asmur, the brickmaker.
Yeah.
Asmur was going traveling overseas and promised Archad these extraordinary returns. He was going to buy rare jewels from Phoenician traders. Archad calls them scoundrels.
Yeah. Scoundrels indeed.
And bring them back to Babylon to sell for a huge profit. Sounds good on the surface, right?
Sounds tempting. But what happened?
Disaster. Asmur, who knew everything about making bricks but nothing about gems, got totally duped by these slick Phoenician talkers. He came back to Babylon not with priceless jewels, but with worthless bits of brightly colored glass. Archad lost his entire year's savings, the very seeds he'd so carefully saved and planted. It must have been devastating.
Absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
But the lesson learned was invaluable. Archad realized too late that he should have known better. Asmer was an expert in mud and straw, not precious stones.
Right.
So the essential wisdom here is seek advice only from people who are genuinely experienced in that specific thing you're investing in. If you want to know about stars, talk to an astrologer. Sheep, go to the herdsman. Jewels, find a reputable jewel merchant.
Taking advice from inexperienced people, even if they're well-meaning friends or relatives, it basically means you're paying them to prove their opinions are false. You're funding their learning curve with your capital.
That's a great way to put it. In modern terms, yeah, don't take stock tips from your neighbor just because they drive a nice car, unless that neighbor happens to be a qualified fiduciary investment advisor who understands your situation. You have to vet the source of the wisdom.
So Cure 4 isn't just about avoiding obvious scams. It's maybe more importantly about avoiding the trap of trusting unqualified people simply because you want the amazing outcome they're promising.
Protect your principal. That comes first, above all else.
Okay, so we've covered the practical mechanics. Save, budget, invest, protect. But none of that works without the right internal mindset, the right fortitude. Which brings us to the philosophy of action.
Yes, the willpower piece.
Let's start with Archad's definition of willpower, because it's not what most people think.
No, it's really interesting. Most people think of willpower as this, like immense brute strength you use to force yourself through pain or denial.
Right, like gritting your teeth.
Archad just dismisses that idea. He defines willpower much more simply and maybe more practically. It's the unflinching purpose to carry a task you set for yourself to fulfillment.
Unflinching purpose. So it's about consistency, not necessarily the size or difficulty of the task itself.
Exactly. He uses that trivial example, the pebble task. If he decided he was going to throw one pebble over the bridge every single day for 100 days, he would just do it.
He wouldn't skip a day and then try to catch up by throwing two the next day?
Nope. Nor would he suddenly decide halfway through that the task was pointless and just quit. He'd see it through.
Why is that seemingly minor thing so critical?
Because that unwavering commitment to these small, defined tasks builds genuine self-confidence. If you prove to yourself you can follow through on a trivial commitment.
Like throwing a pebble.
Yeah. Then you build the internal muscle, the track record with yourself that you need for the bigger, more important tasks. Like sticking to your budget when temptation hits, or holding on to your investment plan during a market panic. Self-confidence comes from that history of keeping your word to yourself, no matter how small the promise.
That makes sense. And that self-confidence, that unflinching purpose, seems directly linked to the next idea they discussed. The attraction of good luck.
In Babylon, they sometimes associated good luck with the goddess Ishtar. But Archad and his students pretty quickly dismissed the idea that wealth just comes down to random chance, or, winning at gambling.
Yeah, they definitely pour cold water on gambling as a path to wealth.
Absolutely. Archad asked the crowd, "Are any of you consistent winners at the gambling tables?" And apparently they all just groaned. They knew, deep down, that random luck is fleeting. It's rarely, if ever, a solid foundation for building real wealth.
So if it's not random chance, what is it? The sources seem to frame good luck fundamentally as opportunity, an opportunity just waiting to be accepted.
Exactly. And who accepts opportunity? The person who is prepared. The person who is ready and willing to act. The real enemy of good luck, they argue, is procrastination.
Delaying action.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we see this lesson illustrated so powerfully through those two stories they share. The first one involves a merchant who has a chance to invest in what sounds like a really profitable sea voyage, a trading venture.
Okay.
But he hesitates. He delays making the decision. Why? Because he and his wife wanted to buy some new expensive robes first. They prioritized immediate consumption, looking good right now.
Over potential long-term gain.
Right. He delayed the blunt Syrian merchant, and the story calls him a procrastinator.
Yeah.
And by the time he finally went back to invest, the opportunity was gone. The venture had closed. He missed out completely on the huge profits it eventually made.
Ouch. Sacrificed a potential fortune for some fancy clothes.
Precisely. And the second story is even more dramatic. It involves an animal buyer. He gets offered this massive flock of sheep and goats, a huge number of animals, for only 2/3 of what they were clearly worth. A fantastic bargain. A huge opportunity.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
You'd think. But he gets stubborn. He refuses to pay the farmer until the next morning. Why? Because the city gates were closed for the night, and he couldn't be bothered to walk back to his tent to get the gold. He was too comfortable.
He literally chose comfort over a massive profit.
He did. And by sunup the next day, the whole situation had changed dramatically. Rumors of a potential siege hit the city.
Ah, so food prices would skyrocket.
Instantly. Buyers rushed out of the city desperate for livestock. The farmer sold that same flock immediately for nearly 3 times the price the animal buyer had been offered just the night before. His hesitation, his desire for comfort, cost him an absolute fortune.
Wow, those are powerful examples.
They really are. And they both point to the same inescapable conclusion. Procrastination, that tendency to delay action, is the absolute worst enemy of good luck. Opportunity is often fleeting, and it favors those who are prepared, decisive, and ready to commit.
So Archad's final word on it is clear.
Crystal clear. Men of action are favored by the goddess of good luck. The person who builds that unflinching purpose, who overcomes procrastination, is the person who is ready to seize opportunity when it appears.
That emphasis on action, on self-respect, and on discipline really provides the bridge to understanding how someone can climb out of even the deepest financial hole. Which brings us to Dasir's story.
Ah yes, Dasir, the camel trader. His story represents, well, financial slavery fully realized. The absolute bottom.
He wasn't always a camel trader, though, right? He started out differently.
No, he started as a saddle maker. And he recounts this very common, very relatable fall from grace. He started indulging his whims, spending more than he earned, buying luxuries he couldn't afford on credit.
That spiral.
Exactly. His debts piled up, made his life miserable, filled him with fear and shame. Eventually, he just couldn't face his creditors anymore, so he fled Babylon.
Ran away from his problems.
Ran away, fell in with robbers out in the desert, got involved in their life, and eventually was captured during a raid and sold into slavery in Syria. His descent was complete, from respected craftsman to literal chattel.
That's about as low as you can go. But even there, in that state, someone challenges him, right? His mistress, Sira.
Yes, Sira refuses to just accept his self-pity or his excuse that, I wasn't born a slave, this isn't really me. She delivers this incredibly powerful challenge to his very soul.
What does she say?
She asks him point blank if he has the soul of a slave. She argues that it was his own weakness, his inability to control his spending, his running from debt that ultimately brought him to this state.
Wow, holding him accountable.
Totally accountable. She insists that a man cannot truly respect himself if he doesn't repay his honest debts. She calls his outstanding debts his real enemies, the enemies that literally ran him out of Babylon.
That must have hit him hard.
It shames him to his core. But it also sparks something in him, a determination to prove, perhaps mostly to himself, that he does have the soul of a free man, that he is worthy of respect.
And Sira helps him escape.
She does. She sees that spark and helps him get away. He makes his way back to Babylon, a changed man. And the first thing he does is implement this incredibly rigid plan, clearly modeled on Archad's teachings, designed to do 2 things simultaneously: pay off his creditors and rebuild his own financial self-respect.
Okay, let's break down that plan, because this feels really relevant for anyone struggling with debt today.
It's incredibly relevant. It's a 3-part allocation of every single coin he earned from that point forward. First, 7/10, 70%. This portion was strictly for living expenses. Home, clothes, food, and importantly, some measure of pleasure or enjoyment of life. But this 70% limit could never be exceeded, even if his earnings went up later.
Okay, strict living budget. What's next?
Second, 2/10, 20%. This part was set aside specifically to pay back his creditors. He had to go to Mathon, the gold lender, and all the others he owed money to, show them his plan, his ledger, and get them to agree to accept regular proportional payments.
So active negotiation with creditors based on a realistic plan.
Yes. And the third part, 1/10, 10%. This is the absolute game changer in his plan. This tenth was paid to himself first, before anything else. It was used to start accumulating his own treasure, his own savings, even while still heavily in debt.
Okay, that's fascinating, because a lot of modern debt advice says, throw every single spare penny at the debt until it's gone, put saving on hold entirely. Why was it so crucial for Dasir, someone deep in debt, to pay himself first with that 10%?
Because that 10% is the psychological anchor. It's the symbol of hope. By paying himself first, even that small amount, he was reclaiming his financial dignity. He wasn't just laboring anymore to survive day to day or solely to pay off past mistakes.
He was building his future again.
Exactly. He was laboring for his own future, for his own potential wealth. This renewed sense of self-respect, this purpose, gave him the willpower, the unflinching purpose, to stick to that rigid 7-0-20-10 structure, even when things are incredibly tight.
And the creditors agreed to this?
They did. They saw his determination, his detailed plan, and the fact that he was making regular payments, however small. They agreed not to molest him, as the book says, as long as he kept his word.
And the result for Dabasir?
It was his complete regeneration. He followed that plan religiously. Slowly, gradually, he paid back every single debt he owed, and eventually he started to hear the jingle of gold and silver in his own purse again. He regained his self-respect, became an honorable man, and eventually a successful camel trader.
It's an incredible turnaround story.
It really is. It proves that these principles aren't just for people who are already well off. They are the fundamental structure by which financial independence is built, regardless of how deep a hole you might be starting from.
Which leads us perfectly into the more advanced wisdom, the stuff Archad passed down to his son Nomasir. This comes in the form of the 5 laws of gold.
Right, and Nomasir's own story really highlights the value of knowledge over just having capital. Archad gave his son 2 things: a substantial bag of gold to start him off, and a clay tablet inscribed with these 5 laws.
And what happened?
Well, Nomasir, being young and inexperienced, quickly lost the gold, as wealth often is quickly lost by those who don't have the wisdom to manage it.
But he kept the tablet.
She saved the tablet. He held on to the wisdom. He went out into the world, presumably applied the laws he'd learned the hard way, and 10 years later, he returned to Babylon, not just having recouped his losses, but with 3 bags of gold, proving that the wisdom on that tablet was infinitely more valuable than the initial bag of gold itself.
Okay, so let's go through these 5 laws. They feel like the governing principles for Cure 4 guarding your treasure.
They absolutely are. They're like the fixed stars you navigate by when managing your money.
Yeah.
Law number 1 just reiterates that foundational principle. Gold comes readily and in increasing quantity to the person who saves not less than 1/10 of their earnings. You have to establish that inflow first.
Got it. Save consistently. Law 2.
Law 2 focuses on making the gold multiply, but stresses the need for active management. Gold labors diligently and profitably for the wise owner who finds for it profitable employment, multiplying like the flocks of the field. It emphasizes that you need to be an active, wise steward of your capital, not just passive.
Okay, makes sense. Law 3.
Law 3 reinforces that crucial point about seeking expert advice. Gold clings to the protection of the cautious owner who invests his treasures under the advice of men skilled in the ways of gold. Again, find experienced professionals in the specific area you're investing in.
Right, avoid the brickmaker giving jewel advice. Law 4.
Law 4 is the critical what not to do, based directly on Archad's own painful lesson. Gold flees the man who invests in enterprises where he is not familiar with the business or is inexperienced in its handling. If you don't understand how it works, stay away. Your principal is at risk, period.
Don't invest in things you don't understand. Seems obvious, but so often ignored. And Law 5.
Law 5 is the direct warning against greed and scams. Gold flees the man who demands impossible earnings, follows the alluring advice of tricksters and schemers, or trusts it to his own inexperience and romantic desires. Basically, reject any get-rich-quick scheme that promises unrealistic returns. They almost always lead to loss.
Those 5 laws seem to cover almost every major investment pitfall.
They really do. They're remarkably comprehensive and timeless.
And to really see how to apply these, especially Law 3 about advice and Law 4 about familiarity, we can look at the perspective of Mathon, the gold lender.
Yes, Mathon gives some very practical advice to Rodan, the spear maker. Rodan suddenly receives this windfall, 50 pieces of gold from the king, which is a huge amount.
Life-changing money back then.
Absolutely. And Mathon wisely points out that receiving a lump sum like that immediately brings responsibility and often this paralyzing fear of losing it.
Yeah, I can imagine. And Rodan is facing that classic dilemma we see today, family pressure to invest it unwisely.
Exactly. His sister is begging him to lend the entire 50 pieces to her husband, Araman. Araman seems well-meaning, but he's totally inexperienced. He has this grand plan to become a merchant, buying goods in faraway lands.
It sounds exactly like Archad's mistake with Asmur the brickmaker, just with a family connection.
Precisely. And this is where sentimentality can absolutely destroy a lifetime of savings. Mathon knows that sentiment and sound finance are often enemies.
So how does Mathon advise him?
He tells Rodan this fantastic little fable, the story of the ox and the ass. The ass, wanting a day off from its usual light duties, convinces the hard-working ox to pretend to be sick. So the ox plays sick. But what does the farmer do? He just says, okay, ox is sick, ass can pull the plow today. The ass ends up having to do the ox's heavy labor all day, suffering the burden it tried to avoid.
Huh. Be careful what advice you give or whose burden you take on.
Exactly the lesson. Mathon tells Rodin, if you lend unwisely, especially out of some foolish sentiment to help someone who isn't qualified or doesn't have a sound plan, you risk taking their burden onto yourself. You might lose your principal, and they might still end up in hopeless debt.
So you have to judge very carefully.
Very carefully. Can your gold perform a genuinely useful purpose for the borrower? And crucially, can it return safely to you? Or is it likely to just be wasted, leaving everyone worse off?
So what does Mathon consider a safe loan? What criteria does he use?
His criteria are very pragmatic, very cold perhaps, but effective. He looks for two main types of security, and he tracks them meticulously in his own lending. First, loans secured by property of greater value than the loan itself, collateral land, jewels, camels, houses, something tangible who can claim if the loan defaults.
Makes sense. Asset-backed lending. What's the second type?
Second, loans based on the borrower's assured earning capacity. A person who has a steady job, provides a service, labors reliably, someone with a proven, certain income stream that can cover the repayments.
So collateral or reliable income, not just good intentions or a hopeful plan?
Definitely not. Which is why he strongly warns Rodin not to lend his entire life savings. He emphasizes those 50 pieces represent 50 years of hard saving, one piece a year to his inexperienced brother-in-law, Araman.
But he doesn't say lend nothing.
No, he offers a compromise, a way to test the waters. Lend only a small, manageable amount first, maybe one piece of gold, 1 year's worth of savings. Let Araman try his plan on a small scale.
Prove he can succeed first.
Exactly. If Araman can handle that small amount wisely, make a profit, and repay it, then maybe he could be trusted with more later. Start small, prove the concept.
That's very sensible advice. What about the expected returns?
Mathon is equally clear on that. Be conservative in your expectations. To lend out your gold demanding usurious returns, meaning unreasonably high interest rates, is just inviting loss. Why? Because only incredibly risky ventures or desperate people would agree to pay those kinds of rates.
So high promise returns usually signal high risk.
Almost always. Mathon advises seeking success through association with established, proven people and enterprises, whose success is already demonstrated, not through fantastic, untested, high-risk plans.
It all comes back to protecting that principle first.
Always. Which, as we wrap up this deep dive, brings us to that final, powerful analogy the Babylonians used for securing wealth: the walls of Babylon itself.
Ah, the famous
Those walls were legendary. They were the ultimate symbol of enduring protection, of security. And they lasted for centuries because they were built strong, they were fully protected, and they were constantly maintained.
So the analogy for us today.
In our modern world, we need to build our own impenetrable walls around our finances. The walls of adequate insurance against disaster, diversified savings accounts, dependable, conservative investments that safeguard our principal. We can't afford to leave ourselves exposed without protection against the unexpected tragedies or, the economic sieges that life can throw at us.
It seems this entire deep dive really boils down to the idea that wealth isn't magic. It isn't luck. It's built on timeless human traits: discipline, acquiring knowledge, and then taking consistent action.
Absolutely. The wisdom we've pulled from ancient Babylon gives us that essential 5-step path to prosperity. The one Archad taught, the one Dasir lived.
Start that purse fattening. Commit, absolutely commit to paying yourself that 110th first. Made it automatic.
2, control your expenditures. Use that budget not as a punishment, but as a defense mechanism to make sure you're prioritizing your biggest desire, financial security.
3, make your gold multiply. Put your savings to work. Understand and utilize the power of compounding interest to build that steady golden stream.
4, guard your treasures from loss. Prioritize the security of your principal above all else. Seek expert advice, but only from those genuinely skilled and experienced in that specific area. Don't trust amateurs with your future.
And 5, be a person of action. Crush that spirit of procrastination. Be prepared, be decisive, and seize opportunity when it shows up. Remember, men and women of action are favored by the goddess of good luck.
It's such a compelling argument that wealth isn't accidental. It's not just inherited lottery winnings. It is, as Archad said, a child born of knowledge and persistent purpose.
Yeah, that final quote from the source is really worth holding on to. Wealth that stayeth to give enjoyment and satisfaction to its owner comes gradually, because it is a child born of knowledge and persistent purpose. Gold is lost quickly by those without the knowledge.
But it can be secured by those who seek and apply the wisdom, even if they start with nothing.
So here's the final thought for you, the learner, to take away from this deep dive. Now that you have this ancient yet incredibly relevant
wisdom, what's the one specific, unflinching task you'll commit to doing today? Maybe it's automating that first 10% savings transfer. Maybe it's drafting that first defense budget, something small, to start building that self-confidence, that unflinching purpose. And maybe ask yourself, what do you want your own account of stewardship, your financial story, to look like 10 years from now?